Welcome, everybody, to the NLI USA Signature Speaker Series. I'm Adina Canefield, the CEO of NLI USA. As many of you know, NLI USA is committed to creating programs that reflect the preservation work of the library and how it relates to our contemporary lives today. As the library fulfills its mission to preserve our history, we are all part of that collective story, and with that, part of a collective responsibility. To share that story during this historic time for Israel and for the Jewish people worldwide. NLI USA's, or NLI's, October 7th Bearing Witness initiative and the work of its amazing partners, some of whom are on with us today, helps us carry out that responsibility. And so today you will all be bearing witness. You will hear from three people who are at the forefront of the documentation work underway post-October 7th. At the end of this program, you'll have an opportunity to ask our speakers questions, and we invite you to post questions in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. Now I have the privilege of introducing our three speakers today. Dr. Raquel Ukeles is the head of collections at the National Library of Israel. She's responsible for the overall development of the library's collections and for digital, cultural, and educational initiatives based on the collections. She holds a doctorate from Harvard University with a concentration on Islamic and Jewish studies. Raquel has published and taught on a wide array of subjects related to comparative Jewish and Islamic traditions and on historical currents shaping Israeli society. Dr. Ohad Ufaz is the co-founder and head of documentary and film at Edut 710. He's an award-winning international filmmaker, a senior lecturer at Oranim College of Education, and an expert in ethics of testimony and documentary film. Ohad is an entrepreneur of community media and testimony. In addition to Edut 710, his most recent project was co-directing The Listener, a documentary exploring the experience of collecting testimony from Holocaust survivors. Itay Ken-Tor is the co-founder and head of partnerships and resource mobilization at Edut 710. He is also an award-winning filmmaker, director, and producer of numerous documentaries and series, including films for Yad Vashem. He's a lecturer at Oranim College and the Open University and serves as the national guide for high school film productions for the Ministry of Education. Thank you all for joining us today, both our audience members and our wonderful speakers. I want to begin by asking you, Raquel, to talk about how the library's Bearing Witness project began, going back in time a bit, and how that partnership with Edut 710 took shape in those early days.
Thank you, Adina, and it's very meaningful and powerful to be with all of you, and especially with my extraordinary partners, Itay and Ohad. In preparing for this panel, I actually went back and reread messages, WhatsApps, and emails to try to recreate those frenetic early days. October 7th, I was in synagogue the whole day and was clueless about what was going on, except we kept going in and out of the mamadim, the shelters. On October 8th, we all walked around in a daze, and I remember trying to give blood. October 9th, we got to work, and the first work we did was to capture online material, because right away we had heard that material was going up and being taken down. And so we moved very quickly to be collecting both websites and social media. And in those early days, about 10 of us at the National Library, we dropped everything else and we just got to work. And you can see the language of trying to figure out what our role is in these early days. While we're going to funerals, we have friends and family who are going into reserve duty. we were so worried about, I had two friends who were taken hostage, or so we thought at the time. And in looking over these few weeks of October, it's amazing in retrospect to see the crystallization of our work. I met Itay and I think Ohad on October 18th, where we had our first meeting, and they were already, I'll let them describe what they were doing, but they were already out in the field. And we were trying to make a decision within the National Library whether we were going to go out into the field as well, which there was pressure actually on us to go out and start interviewing. And we felt that given that there were already a number of grassroots actors out there, that the National Library had a different role to play. And so that I found documentation by the end of October where we can see the framework already in place, that the library would serve as professional support and training along with other experts in the field, and the convener in creating a network to make sure that these growing initiatives, we would all be directing our work to be collaborative and towards the same end, which is to document, to collect, and to preserve these stories and this catastrophe as it was unfolding. I just want to add two more dimensions of this that was already happening in October. In mid-October, we reached out to colleagues already in the States because we understood right away that this was not a local catastrophe and crisis, that this had echoes and ramifications already throughout the world. And we understood that the work of preserving these stories had to be beyond Israel, and we had to be working in collaboration, not only in Israel, but also in places around the world. A critical conversation happened at the end of October with Robert Williams, the head of USA Shoah Foundation. And he's the one who really urged me to see our role at the National Library, that we had an opportunity to get it right historically. And he made the comparison between Holocaust testimonies, and I'll let Ohad talk more about that in depth because he really is invested in and an expert in that area. But in the case of Holocaust testimony, there was some testimony that happened during and right after the Shoah, but most of it happened decades later. And by then there were a number of initiatives that developed that were not in conversation and were not working together. And so he really encouraged me to try to build it right from the beginning and to get all the major initiatives and institutions on board. And that is what we did. And I really want to thank Itay and Ohad and the others at Edut 710, because they understood that from the very beginning, and they were already defining their work as public and collaborative work and generous work. And that partnership, our partnership, really allowed us to lay the foundations for this community that we have indeed built. And I'll talk more about that later, so that we're all invested in the common public project of making sure that all of these stories are preserved and made accessible for now and for the future.
Ohad, I'd love to hear from you about those early days as you launched into this work and what was going through your mind and what you saw as your role, and given your experience taking other testimony in the past. Tell us a little bit about the beginning of your documentation work.
Okay, thank you. It's great to meet with you and to tell the story of Edut 710 in the context of the work of the library in preserving and developing the memory of this terrible day, and I think teaching and learning and exploring the lessons we have to learn from history. So Edut 710, which is Testimony 710 in English, is a civic independent initiative. As Adina said already, I was I'm a filmmaker, and I taught and researched the ethics of documentary filmmaking and of testimony making more than 10 years before the attack of 2023, October 2023. And in the weeks before, we were busy. I was in a few circles of documentary filmmakers, scholars, teachers, and especially a group of filmmakers that were together filming the protesting, the movement of protesting, the democratic protest against the government, and they were working together in cooperation, and that was, apart from sharing the same ideas, it was fascinating to me, and I joined them in order to teach filmmaking and to make it more professionally. So on the 7th of October, which was Shabbat, we were ready to go and document um, the protestings of Motzai Shabbat, of Shabbat evening. And then the news from the south started to flow, and many of us has this instinct of running with our cameras and the gear and document history as it evolves. And because what I learned from the initiatives that took the testimonies of the Holocaust, mainly what was done in the Fort Knox archive in Yale, and the approach that was developed by Dori Laub, I asked my friends to take it slower, not to rush like other journalists and media and push cameras and mics to the face of the survivors that just fled from this disaster zone and went into hotels and camp. Dori Laub, Holocaust survivor, psychiatrist, was the first one of the first to document survivors' testimonies on video, and his approach is extremely important to our case, but I think in general for the documentation of disasters, because what he says that he emphasizes the place of the survivor and the importance for us filmmakers to make sure and to take care of the well-being of the witness. So this is our first mission, and that's why what I ask from my friend to keep in mind. They are traumatic. They came out of hell, and we need to do it slowly, and we have to invite them. We shouldn't push them. They have to keep in control. I'll ask Itay to say a little bit more about the first steps with the library. I guess I was in this meeting. I think I felt relieved because we are independent and we're just a group of civilians that used the social media in order to work together from all around Israel. But then to have this important institution behind us or above us or mainly with us, it's not only important for us. I think it's extremely important for our witnesses to get the recognition of such an important institution. So maybe Itay would say more about this collaboration and how it evolved.
So I'll be really brief first. Thank you for having us on this event. So I'll say that from the very beginning, it was clear for us that we take testimonies for the future. We work also for the recovery of the people, the immediate effect, but also for the future. And it was important for us to chase everyone who ran down to the Negev with camera and to try to collaborate. And we're more worried about the raw footage than the short clips that people did immediately. And since we wanted it to be preserved for the future, so the immediate place was to call the La National Library as a house that we knew can host it for the future. And we want it till today that the material will be preserved for generations, and it will not will be dependent on our ability to raise funds to do it. And the National Library as the national place is the right place for that. And I called, I think it was Matan first, and then we had this meeting trying to tell the library what we're doing and what we're aiming to. And since then, I think the most important thing was that Rachel and I and Rachel and Edut saw things on the same way. And it's always about personal contact and relationship, and it's also about the vision that you have. And I think that we have this joint vision that should be one place where our grandchildren will come, and then when they will want to learn about October 7th, they won't have to go to different archives and collect in different places, but to create one place.
Thank you. I want to give people a sense of the testimony that you're collecting. And I know, Ohad and Itay, you picked 2 clips of testimony from testimony of survivors. And so I would like to invite you to share that. Ohad, do you want to say something before we show the first clip?
So, yes, please. Because the 2 testimonies we brought are showing different sides of our work, and also the story of 7th of October and the different communities that were attacked. The first woman, Oranit Fahima, religious woman, you will notice immediately. She's a social worker from the city from the town of Sderot. And I think this is enough in order to get into it and to feel a little bit with her the experience of this day.
There's no sound.
No sound.
Still no sound, sir.
Sarah, you have to share sound.
This was always the fear in sharing by
Challenge.
Zoom, but we'll get there.
So-
Thanks for bearing with us. And it is important to hear the voices, obviously.
So maybe we'll say till it's working that and very quickly we became a 400 volunteers organization, and we were able to collect till today more than 1,700 testimonies. And our goal is to create a multi-perspective archive which will reflect all the different communities that were involved in this event. So we have kibbutzim, moshavim, the cities, the Arabs, Bedouin, foreign workers, rescue teams, military forces, police. So that's the goal. Sarah, whenever, okay.
לקלוט, כאילו, איפה אתה? אני תמיד מדמה את זה לאיזושהי תאונה קטלנית שבן אדם עשה, ויצא במצב אנוש, והוא עכשיו שרד, והוא צריך תהליך שיקום מאוד מסיבי. בערך 6:30 בבוקר, אנחנו שומעים צבע אדום, עוד אמרתי כזה, מה קשור? בדרך כלל אנחנו יודעים שיש מתיחות, בדרך כלל קורה היה איזה חיסול או משהו, ואז אנחנו יודעים שצריך להיות משום מקום, זה הופיע, משום מקום, שמחת תורה, ולא יכולנו להוציא את האף כל פעם שניסיתי, וזה פשוט לא עצר במשך, לדעתי, לא יודעת להגיד לך מדויק, לדעתי 25 דקות, מתחים בלתי פוסקים, כאילו זה לא מפסיק, אתה לא יכול להוציא את האף. ואימא שלי התחילה ממש לפחד, אמרתי לי, זה לא רגיל, משהו קורה פה, ותוך כדי אנחנו מתחילים לשמוע יריות, מאוד 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 קרוב. ממש, צרור יריות, גם בלתי פוסק. זה כבר היה סביב, לדעתי, 6:50, משהו כזה, תוך כדי הקסאמים, ואימא שלי אמרת לי, תקשיבי, היא מסתכלת עליה בעיניים מפוחדות, היא אמרת לי, זה ממש קרוב, אורנית, מה קורה פה? זה ממש קרוב. השכן שלי ממול, בשיא האומץ שלו, לא יודעת איך הוא עשה את זה, הוא פשוט בא, צלצל לי בפעמון, עכשיו שבת, הוא יודע שאנחנו שומרים שבת, הם לא דתיים, ואז אני מבינה שמשהו קורה, כאילו, לא סתם, זה דברים, ואז אני פותחת את הדלת ורצה עליו, ואז הוא צועק לי, תקשיבי, אפילו אל תבואי, תסגרי את כל הדלתות והחלונות, יש מחבלים. ואז אני מבינה שזה לא נגמר, ואתה ממשיך לשמוע יריות, ואז אני אומרת לעצמי, טוב, לא אכפת לי מה קורה, סוגרת את כל התריסים בבית, אומרת לילדים, תעלו למעלה, תסגרו הכל, נועלים דלתות, פותחים טלפונים. לא לבדוק אפילו מה קורה, כמו להתקשר לאבא שלי, לראות מה קורה איתו, הוא ואחי. ואז אנחנו מתקשרים, ואבא שלי ממש ככה, אני שומעת אותו מאוד מוחזק כזה, ומאופק ולוחש, ואומר, אורנית, אני לא יכול לדבר, כל פה מחבלים, ממש מול המשטרה גם. ואמר, אני ממש נתקלתי עם מחבלים, תסגרו את עצמכם, תיכנסו לבית, אל תצאו, אל תפתחו, שום דבר. אמרנו לו, אבא, מה קורה? הוא אמר, אני לא יודע מה להגיד לכם, הכל פה מלא מחבלים. בד בבד נכנס העניין שאחותי נהדרת, אחותי קוראים לה מור גבאי, שהיא הייתה באיזה מישהי מסיבה בזיקים, או לא יודעת, מסיבה, או פגישת חברים, לא יודעת בדיוק מה זה היה. היא שלחה ההודעה האחרונה 6:45 שהכל בסדר, והיא במיגונית, תפס אותה אזעקות בכניסה לשדרות, ומאז אין תשובה, אני אמרתי לבעלי, תקשיב, אני לא עומדת בזה. כולנו מסדרות, אין לי לאן ללכת. ההורים שלי, חמי חמותי, אחים, כאילו כולנו מסדרותים. אמרתי לו, אני לא מצליחה לעמוד בזה, צריך לחשוב מה עושים. ואז התחלנו ככה לארוז קצת ציוד. עכשיו, כל פעם אנחנו מנסים ככה לצאת, אין לנו מושג לאן, פשוט לברוח מהעיר, ואז שולחים לנו לא לצאת, להסתגר בבתים, יש עוד מחבלים, ועוד התקלות, ועוד התקלות, וכל פעם שאנחנו מנסים, יש עוד התקלות, ואת שומעת עוד יריות, ואיכשהו הגעתי לסגן ראש העיר, ואז הוא אומר לי, תקשיבי, תצאו עכשיו, יש חלון הזדמנויות. יש צבא לאורך מהבית שלכם עד היציאה מהעיר, תצאו. כמו שאני, בפיג'מה, בלי לצחצח שיניים, בלי לצחצח, לא צחצחנו יומיים, כאילו, לא תפקדנו. בלי מקלחת, מקלחת האחרונה הייתה יום שישי, וכבר זה היה יום שני. אף אחד מאיתנו לא התקלח, לא היינו מסוגלים, כי זה לעלות לקומה השנייה. ואם יהיה צבע אדום, ומה יהיה, ואם כנסו מחבלים, ואף אחד לא התקלח. וככה ברחנו. וזהו, ואז ביום שני בלילה, הגענו לאילת בערב, כאילו כזה אחר הצהריים ערב, ושני בלילה אנחנו בערך 2:30, 3. אני מקבלת את ההודעה מאבא שלי, שהתקשרו לבוא לזהות את מור, אחותי. אנחנו מאוד מאוד נאחזים באמונה, ואני מרגישה שמבחן האמונה כשלתי, כי כשהתחלתי להבין שמשהו באמת לא טוב קורה, היה קשה לי אפילו להאחז בזה, להגיד שהכל יהיה בסדר, הכל בסדר, אנחנו נשרוד, אנחנו נדע מה עושים, כאילו, וגם אם לא, אז הכל בסדר, הכל מה שכתוב, כתוב, ופשוט לא יכולתי, הרגשתי לאט לאט שאני מאבדת מהשפיות, כאילו, מהפחד.
Oranit's testimony is for me an example of our work. She's just so-called regular woman. Her story is not special. There are so many in Sderot, in the other towns and villages and kibbutzim. There are many stories on one hand that are like it, but on the other hand, she has a very unique, the story that only she can tell. And this is one of the main ideas, that we have no hierarchies. We don't look for the special stories, for the most horrifying, or for heroism. For us, her story, her extremely traumatic, and I invite you to watch the full-length testimony, because we publish both the full-length and the short, what we call essence of testimony. You can see the post-trauma so clear, and since she is a professional, she analyzes herself. When she was mourning for her sister, she couldn't go from Eilat back to the area of Sderot because she couldn't join her family during the Shiv'ah because of the emotional situation she was in. So the way we document is with no hierarchies and with no interruptions, and that's what we learned from Laub, that the witness has to control, and it has to be Oranit's story and not the listener or the one that documents, that edit her story with questions. And I'm extremely proud about this testimony. It's so sensitive and close, and it was done by one of our students from Oranim College, and she was learning and experiencing testimony, the production of testimony before 7th of October. And in the months afterwards, she went to Eilat, to the hotels, to the evacuation camps, and she was staying with people there for months. And at one point, I think it was November 2023, she called me. There are lines of people from Sderot. They would like someone to listen to them because the reporters won't go into it. And more about the differences between regular media or conventional media and our approach. I think Itay would explain more, talking about Batsheva Yahalomi's testimony.
Do we have time, Adina, to show
So we'll show, they're so interesting, and I think that people really like to see that this is
Okay.
the essence of documentation and the personalization. So why don't you introduce the next clip, which is a little shorter, I think, than this one.
Okay, so Batsheva Yahalomi is one of probably the famous survivor of October 7. She was kidnapped with her two young daughters, and her husband was kidnapped separately, and her son was kidnapped separately. They were both living in Nir Oz. You probably know that Nir Oz is one of the communities which was affected dramatically and severely by the attack. The military have never got to there, and 1/4 of the community was either killed or kidnapped on October 7, and now only 6 houses remained untouched in Nir Oz. So Batsheva was with her children in a safe room, and Ohad was trying to protect them from the outside, and he was kidnapped, and then she was kidnapped separately with her son and 2 babies. She was able to get off the motorbike with her babies and return to Israel and to save them. And her young son, Eitan, was kidnapped alone. And after 52 days, Eitan was returned, and Ohad remained in captivity for a long time. We didn't know his situation for a long time, and eventually he was killed on the same day. Batsheva gave her testimony on February 24, after the return of Eitan, and that's what we're gonna hear now.
At about 10 o'clock, the terrorists entered the house. They shoot Ohad and entered the safe room. 4 terrorists full armed with uniform, entered the safe room, and they started to shout on us in Arab. They told us, "Come, Gaza." We understood they want us to go with them. One of them was pointing me his gun, so we had to go out. When we went out, we saw Ohad sitting on the floor, bleeding, injured. He told us he loves us and to go with them. I tried to save the baby. I put the baby on him. I thought they will leave her there. But they took her and pushed us outside. Ohad stayed there on the floor. They brought 2 motorcycles. They put Eitan, my son, on the first one with 2 terrorists and a worker that worked in the kibbutz from Tanzania with him. So Eitan was alone on the motorcycle without us. Me and the 2 daughters were on the second motorcycle. And then we started to drive to Gaza. The motorcycle of me and my 2 daughters were falling very close to the border. And we managed to run away. When the motorcycle was falling, this was the last time I saw Eitan. His motorcycle continued to go. We ran away through the fields for 3.5 hours with pajamas, no shoes, no telephone. They took our phones at the safe room. Eitan was released after 52 days. He came back, not home. Home is not existing anymore. He's here, but he's not like he was before. Not him and not his sister, not me. We can't heal until Ohad will come back. We're waiting for him.
You might saw on Paramount there was they broadcasted on October 7 a TV series named Red Alert, which is based on 4 real stories. One of them is Batsheva Yahalomi story, so you can watch it the dramatic way that they put this series. But I want to talk 2 words about the difference between what the testimony that we take and what usually we see on media. If you saw both testimonies, it doesn't have music and doesn't have visuals. We let the person talk, and that's an ethical decision that we want to give the faces and the people the strong presence. While usually when we take media, we see a lot of visuals that try to explain what the person is talking about, and a lot of music and sound effects to make them us feel what they're talking about. The main problem with it is, first of all, it covers the power of the story, but it also will not be suitable to use in the future. But while we think about future documentaries and future research, and we want to give them the raw footage rather than already created footage that they will not be used to create their own documentary.
Raquel, Itay spoke about some of the ethical considerations in play in his work, and in responsibly sharing these personal stories. And I wanted to hear from you more broadly about the ethical considerations that the library has in play in keeping this work and more broadly the documentation work that you're doing more expansively.
I mean, as we saw so painfully, these are the most agonizing moments in people's lives. And you know, at the very beginning of right after October 7th, there were all these oral history experts who kept trying to stem the tide of people going out and interviewing, because they said this breaks every rule in the book. You do not interview people in trauma. But the field didn't wait for them. And so the oral history experts actually pivoted very, very quickly and realized that if they didn't guide the field was going to go without them. I talked about this network we created, a consortium of the major documentary initiatives and institutions, the consortium we created in January of 24 set out to provide guidelines, ethical guidelines for so many complicated issues that people were already facing and that we continue to face. And so the library in its role of building a 360-degree collection heavily focused on these oral testimonies, but also WhatsApp messages and diaries. And we have millions of video sections from October 7th. We're also collecting the civic society and all the different political and social, religious, and cultural expressions during this period, both in Israel and for how this has affected Jews around the world. So what we've been doing together is we've been writing an ethical code. And I'll just mention a few of the thorny issues involved, which are a lot about balancing between values or interests. For example, there's first and foremost, the value of putting the interviewee, the person who has gone through this trauma, to put them in the center. And that's something I have learned from Ohad and Itay in our countless discussions, that we have to first care about the interviewee and give them all the agency and give them the right, and especially the right to change their mind. So that if a person gave testimony a month after October 7th and a year later realizes that they don't want that to be how they're known in the world, that they have the right to remove that testimony. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, the responsibility of a place like a library is to be a stable repository, to be a place that if something is there today, it's going to be there in 10 years. And so those are two values and tensions. Beyond that, there's also, and again, I think I learned this from Ohad, sorry, Ohad, I keep quoting you, that there's also the public's right to know that there is a need to get quality, rich documentary material out there, especially when we all saw so quickly how polemics took over. And so how do you balance all these interests? That's one. And I'll just share one other thorny tension. And that is, we heard from the first testimony that wow, I'm forgetting her name. Naomi. No, not Pasheva. Ornita, thank you.
Ornit Fahim.
Thank you. Ornit, she references her neighbor. She references the deputy mayor. She's giving the testimony, but she's mentioning other people. Now, in this case, we didn't hear anything problematic, but what if she said that her next door neighbor barricaded his door and refused to let them in? And so on the one hand, you want the full story from the eyewitness, from the person giving testimony, but there are both legal and ethical implications for what are called third parties. Now, by Israeli law, if you are no longer among the living, you don't have rights of privacy. That means that all the people who were murdered, massacred at the Nova Festival, for example, people telling their stories. On the one hand, you want their stories to be told. On the other hand, who makes the decision whether you're harming their privacy? So what we have done is, in these guidelines, we are trying to balance between these values and go beyond the legal rights and responsibilities to think ethically about this work. For that reason, many more eyewitness accounts are available on the Edut 710 website, and I'm happy about that, than the very slow process the National Library is doing. And so while I can talk a little bit more about that if we have time, but we've been using even AI to transform we've worked with it right now over 1,000 testimonies, and we're using AI. A lot of them are coming from Edut 710 and also from other documentary initiatives, to not just to create transcriptions and synopses that we know that AI does, but actually we're testing out whether AI can help us with these privacy issues and flag where there might be a problem of someone talking about somebody else. Because right now of these 1,000 testimonies, only a third we've made available in video, and the rest of them only by transcription, where we're blocking out some of this. And that's just a little moment of some of these ethical issues. We hope to complete this work in the coming months and make this available, because unfortunately, we think about who else will be doing this kind of documenting going forward.
Raquel, I have you and I spoke before this session, this program, and you were talking more broadly about the library's role in preserving the stories. And if you could just speak more broadly to that, I thought it was really interesting, and I wanted people to hear from you on that.
Thank you. So, our role is, I talked about the convener, the aggregator, and to make sure that this material is organized so that it's preserved and made accessible. And I'll just give a few examples of what I mean. One is that we are collecting a huge array of material, so that the eyewitness testimonies can go hand in hand with many different kinds of documentary material, whether it's a WhatsApp message or newspaper material that we collect anyway. And so it allows people to put all this material in context. And also because the library already has extraordinarily rich collections in Israeli history, and especially even in these Gaza border communities, so we can situate the story of Sderot in the much broader history of Sderot. And that's something that's extremely important to the communities themselves, because they want to say to the world, we were not born on October 6th. We have decades and decades, and a lot of cases they were celebrating 60, 70 years on October 6th, 2023. And so that's something that the library can do. The library also today has a very robust approach to taking all this raw material and to turning it into educational material, cultural programming, digital storytelling. And so the first and primary role of the library is to preserve the raw material so that others, like documentary filmmakers or journalists or teachers, can use our material. But we also see our public engagement work as modeling the kinds of storytelling that can be done with this material.
Itay, I know that you've been working on AI initiatives and really trying to make the oral testimony accessible and retrievable, as is the library. And I'd love you to describe a little bit more about your work in that arena and how you're cataloging and allowing people, both just general members of the public and academics, to access things and sort through things.
So I'd say I'm not an AI person, I'm not an engineer, but we understand the importance and the area that we are at. And we absolutely understand the urgency of make this in testimonies accessible to the public. I mean, the library is doing a great work, but as a normal institution, they usually move a bit slower than private initiatives. And having spent now more than 2 weeks in the States, I understand even more in a deeper way the need of these stories to be heard and used as a fight and combat denial and anti-Semitism. And we use AI in several aspects. The first one, of course, is the basic translation and transcripting, although it's not good enough, so we have a human control over it. So it doesn't replace humans, it just supports humans. The second layer is educational initiative that we created, which enable every person to curate and create his own ceremony or class based on the testimonies. And that in that case, he just type in any words that he wants, and then he get a selection of testimonies which related to the word. I mean, and that's, for example, if you type in heroism, if in old days you use transcript and then people do not say I made a heroism act. Okay, the AI has to define what is heroism or hope. People are asking for a lot of about hope in testimonies. So it's not people do not use the word hope that common, but the words that they say, the sentence that they say reflects hope. So AI helps us to pull these testimonies and bring them to the public. And the third layer of using AI is a cutting edge archive that we're designing to be that you will be able to ask any question that you want about testimonies. It's either what's the common word about testimonies, but it can be also how people react, the difference between female testimony and male testimony, or is there places where people usually silent, they can either identify the video. So that's really places that the AI tools are already there, and you have to curate them and create this archive that will be used in public. And this is the thing that we're going to develop with the Hebrew University. Our head of archive is Professor Renana Keida, who has a name worldwide in digital humanities, and she's leading this initiative.
You know, we've been focusing on oral testimony, which is really, at the heart and really bringing the lives that were affected by October 7th to the forefront in such a powerful way. And in addition to that, the library has a broader collection effort. And Raquel, I wanted to ask you to speak to, just very briefly in the last few minutes, the broader context of the Bearing Witness collection effort and where we're at now, 2 years later. The live hostages are home. And what is the relevance now? Some people might say we should be looking forward. We need to focus on rebuilding. Why continue to document the past? To talk about the continued Bearing Witness initiative, its scope, and how it relates to the rebuilding of the country. Just a short, easy question, Raquel.
So we've been at this for 2 years now. We keep asking ourselves when we will declare end of collecting, real-time collecting. And when there was a ceasefire, I wrote immediately to the CEO of the library and I said, okay, can we declare, as we say in Hebrew, ad kan, until now, the end of the real-time collecting, and now we're going to process everything. And he said, let's wait and see if this actually is a ceasefire that holds. So we're actually, we're rarely this attuned to current events. We set this project when we started, we said it's going to take 5 years. So we are in the middle of this project. And as Itay very diplomatically referenced, that we take time to move through, and especially because of the complicated privacy issues, we are taking our time. We are dealing with material. How do you process 2 million videos? How do you process thousands of WhatsApp messages? And so, as Adina, you referenced, the value added of library is this, many different kinds of material to tell many different kinds of stories. And I have come to believe that that's our role. And that has to be a continual role, almost a vigilant role, that as we move, in time, many people have already tried to co-opt the narrative and to tell an agenda-driven story. And the first role of a library is to stand against that. The library, we always say about the library, is a place where everybody sits comfortably on the shelf together, even digitally. That our role our job is to make sure that the raw material for all the different stories are preserved and made available. Ohad and Itay referenced that. That's one of the many places where we align in our values. I do want to say that in addition to this work we're doing in Israel, we feel the work right now in Israel for us is making sure to collect everything that has been documented already, and that's going to take us another year. Our work in America and Europe and in other places around the world is ongoing. I saw a number of questions about what about the diaspora, and we agree with you. We are working with specific targeted projects in America, in Europe, in South America, in Australia, and these are collaborations with local institutions and actors. For example, in North America, we're doing a focused collecting project on campuses, but not only, also with American Jewish organizations. And we have been collecting testimonies, and we are going to be continuing to do oral testimony work to make sure that your voices are part of this story. And the many, many stories involved. So I think this is we're kind of halfway to a 5-year goal. And the goal is that, and I'll just say one last thing, is that the goal is so that everybody doesn't have to walk around with these stories sitting on their chests. And that is the therapeutic aspect of the work we've been doing. And people have said that to us, whether it's, when I was in Alumim or in Kfar Aza, people say that to us, but also when I was in Berkeley and I talked about this project, people broke down crying because we've seen, Ohad mentioned the deniers, and it's now become a much more complicated story because of 2 years of the war and many threads that people are very worried that this is going to dissipate and disappear. And so knowing that this material is collected and preserved and made available in a stable, trusted repository, I think has an extraordinarily important role in enabling the rehabilitation to happen.
We're going to turn to a couple of questions now. We could go on and on with hearing from you, but let's hear from you in the context of our audience a little bit. And Raquel, you answered some of the questions already. I want to invite people in the chat. We'll post where you can see a good number of the testimonies, and they'll be added as they're, we'll have them in Hebrew and in English, and we'll be adding more over time. So we'll share that information. There was a question, Ohad and Itay, whether you're interviewing witnesses multiple times. Are you going back? Is that a best practice in such collecting of stories? Can you speak to that?
We definitely not only open to that, we think it's important because what people told on the first days and weeks and months has changed. It was an ongoing war. They evacuated their villages and the settlements, and only now slowly getting back. The historical view changes. They heard more. We just saw Batsheva Yahalomi's testimony. It was before she knew that Ohad Yahalomi was killed, and before his body was returned. So there's definitely a place to go back to Batsheva and others, and I assume that everybody are in a changing state of emotions and so on. The thing is that we are obliged to get to as many people as possible. And most of this project is based on volunteering, on volunteers' work. So we have to be economical with that. And we also took the obligation, the responsibility to edit and publish. So it's video and text editors that work in their spare time. They feel it's their miluim, reserve duty for this. And so our first obligation is to listen to as many as possible, and we reached already. It's an incredible amount of people for this very short time of documentation. We already approaching the 2,000 testimonies. 1,000 was already published, but there are many more people to reach, to get them to be confident about our work, to understand the importance of keeping it in the library, and only later on we can go back to people, and some are asking for it to give another testimony, second, maybe third, and there is definitely a place for it if the resources are there.
Can you, Ohad and Itay, reflect on or share the relationship between the testimony that's given and the healing process, either that you've seen directly or observed, or that those who have given testimony have shared with you, or that any of the professionals, healing professionals, people in that field have discussed with you? So essentially understanding more of this in the context of healing.
I would say that we learned, I said that I learned a lot from Dory Laub's approach. He was treating people in the clinic, and he was an expert in trauma, and still he initiated the testimony project in order to reach to wider communities. And because although he didn't understand nothing about cameras, and so he had partners from production experienced, he understood that having the tape, having the video, it was video camcorders and tapes back then, VHS, having it at home is important for the survivor, the family, the community. So we learned, and for quite a while, for many, from his writing, but since Edut 710 was initiated, it was extremely profound. People came and they were already gratitude while giving the testimony. And then we started to share even before we put it online, we share it again with witnesses, getting their permission to publish once again, to make sure that when they gave the first permission, they were in their senses. So they can regret 2 times in the process. And then they were asking to share the edited testimonies within the communities. And more people learned about their neighbors and sometimes about their partners. There were husbands and wives and children that didn't know how their family member experienced this day, and the experienced were sometimes the same events, the same facts, but the experience is completely different. And they learn from each other, and they sometimes need the testimony in order to understand how mommy reacted, how granny, and so on. And of course, about the neighbor, about the settlements, and that's what led to our newer projects that are more like community testimony. And actually, it also came from the communities. They asked for it. They want to understand what happened, and they want to tell the story by themselves. They want to have the agency to own it.
And I think that
Maybe I can add more.
I will just add really quickly 2 things. The first one, that we have this clip that we show people telling of the effect of the testimony, and one of the most strong quote there is the person tell that he came to give the testimony after he saw what he made to his wife, and how she, after giving the testimony, her life was changed completely, and she became again a woman and a wife and a mother, and came back to work. So that's just it's one of many comments that we have. And the second note that I took an interview with educational psychologist of one of these regional council, and he said he gave you really the approval that what we're doing is good and gives a great relief to the people.
I think
And
that's
I think it's also, just 1 minute, I think it's the testimonies, the editing, the publishing, the sharing with society is a big step in processing this event, which is traumatic all over Israel, over the Jewish diaspora, and we have to process it.
we will conclude with that remark, which is really about moving forward, how building on the past helps you become stronger, processing, understanding the past, owning it, telling things from your point of view and your experience empowers you. And you've shared with us how this is part of the rebuilding of the country now, hopefully, in this hopeful next stage for Israel and for the Jewish people worldwide. Thank you so much for the work you're doing, all of you, and for
Thank
sharing
you.
just a small slice of it with us today, giving us a taste of your important historical work. We feel privileged to be able to work with you, and Raquel, for you to be leading this effort of documentation for the Jewish people worldwide with your team in Israel. Thank you very, very much.
Tina. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
I
you.
just want to
Make sure to visit these websites, and I just want to put a plug in. The Edut 710 website is really user-friendly and accessible,
Thank you.
and it has wonderful material, and if you can use that word for this horrifying set of events, but really meaningful, moving material that can be used for a number of the questions that were raised about educational institutions and libraries. And the library also has a platform, and our material will be coming up over the next year or so.
We'll be sending a link to everybody that registered with both websites, so you can access the testimony and mark your calendars. We have another wonderful program coming up on November 12th. It is Mizrahi Heritage Month, and we'll be doing a wonderful program. You'll get some information about that. Very different topic, but equally interesting. So thank you all very, very much. Thank you to our National Library of Israel community for being a part of the library and learning with us. Be well,
And
everyone.
thank you so much.